So, the Best Picture Oscar nominees for 2024, most weren't very good, or I just avoided them like an insistent chugger in the street, except the cute ones sometimes. I was all aboard Dune Part 2, Doug Part 1, loved the novel, was happy to see it nominated for the most prestigious Best Film Award along with, or other than the Palme d'Or, and then the only one I considered of interest was this picture, Conclave, directed by one Edward Berger from a script by Peter Strawn, based off of a 2016 novel of the same name, authored by Robert Harris. I liked the idea of dense Catholic papal drama. I liked the English thespians attached. Actually, just fiends. Tucci and Lithgow are Americans. The other major players are performed by Irish, Mexican, Georgian, or Italian actors, although Lucien Masmati is English born from Tanzanian parents. And I liked the idea of a big budget at $20 million. It was money well spent, lavish production piece with sleek cinematography, brimming with tension and discussing issues pertaining to the church in the contemporary moment. Spoilers for those who haven't seen this yet, so please feel free to leave if you're wanting to see it as unaware of the narrative's events as possible, which I would recommend. I was excited to see Conclave, and I felt as though it really lived up to the hype after having now viewed it. A really excellent script that examines the fervour of the church's strident traditionalists, the potential for corruption around any institution which confers power and influence upon its administrators, and the crisis of values faced by those of the progressive wing. Conclave cannot be accused of having a predictable storyline. It manages to intertwine several troubles facing the church in the present moment throughout one engaging, thrilling, investigative, dramatic speculation. Conclave does attempt to display a respect for the sanctity of the Catholic Church or the Vatican as an institution, though it does appear quite willing to almost sassily question some of its precepts. I believe that one has to take the realistically, potentially negative approach, at least if we are to assign a moral value judgment to it, of the Church, or the Vatican specifically, as being occupied by humans, when dealing with a religious institution in any way but with reverence, which Conclave clearly wasn't interested in doing, for better or for worse. A script that was more explicitly pro Catholic might have affected the level of immersion, the impact of any attempts at realism for this convicted thriller. A script that was explicitly anti Catholic had a lot more opportunities and topics to demonize the church that Strawn, and presumably source author Harris, clearly chose not to explore. Conclave is a thoroughly secular view of the Vatican and the purpose of Vatican politics, which I feel is preferable to the one note pro Vatican alternative, which would feel like an idealized world wherein the recognized thriller parameters are superfluous and meaningless, as opposed to one which feels and seems to operate like our own, as Conclave's reality feels to a viewer. If anything, Conclave seems like a film which is supportive yet also critical of the progressive wing of the church's clergy, critical as in open to the potential for their mortal moral blindness. And insofar as a lot of Catholics, though certainly not all, decry this particular perspective as radically anti Catholic, then maybe yes, Conclave is anti Catholic, though Conclave was likely intended for more secular audiences or non Catholic religious viewers who are fascinated by the enigmatic and sacralized nature of the inner church dealings, though conditioned to considering the body and brains of the institution to be scandalously fallible and predictably corrupt, and for any Catholic viewers to be in awe of the scale, the level, the scale of the production's detail, the script's wealth of knowledge, the reveling and aesthetic, and maybe just the feeling of being acknowledged in a highly mainstream, well-funded movie event. The film had no intention of appealing to appeasing the more traditionalist wing of the Catholic Church, clergy and laity, but then whilst it presents their arguments as a set of coherent sentences, reasoned and having some possible justifications, the character who voices these stances, Cardinal Tedesco, is displayed as fairly barbaric and unlikable, making the film's allegiance or preferences concerning, say, the rather recent synod on synodality very clear. The film does espouse a non-Catholic observer's perspective, innately and quite clearly, as from what I can at least understand, neither the initial novelist Robert Harris nor screenwriter Strawn or director Berger appear to be Catholics. If anything, one may assume that their upbringing as Englishmen could predict their stance on the Catholic Church and its corridors of power. Again, this is no bad thing, it assists the film as an overall endeavour, although I don't think the creators can complain if the ardent traditionalist Catholics take ire with it, as it is plainly seeking to discredit their theological priorities, and that's fine, that's one's own prerogative, and I don't agree with the hyper-traditionalist Catholics either, for unnecessary clarification, but they can't claim the film adheres to a certain idea of Catholicism or, obviously, at all supports it, and it is true that the same hyper-traditionalist Catholics would disparage a large swathe of church culture, modern culture, and even the post-Vatican II developments. So if Conclave's creators feel upset that it has been scorned by this wing, it need not feel misery. It has extensive company, including many devout or passionate Catholics who are deemed as progressive and reformist, and thereby un-Catholic, by this cranky, assertively zealous wing, including, in their condemnations, the late Pope Francis himself, so it seemed. It really must be said, Conclave is magnificently shot. Cinematographer Stéphane Fontaine shot exquisitely crafted films A Prophet from 2009 and Jackie from 2016. Extremely considerately edited, superbly directed, outstandingly performed. In terms of all of the usual facets of a film production, Conclave is a bewildering accomplishment. It is whether one can deem the script itself to be of genius, whether as a thriller work, whether it is too unsubtly pulpy or not sufficiently existential, say, or perhaps one decries the supposed disrespect it shows to the church and to the papacy and the clergy. And I'm very impressed with the screenplay overall, though maybe others might not be. I'd be quite curious to hear what these others might think of this incredibly ambitious film. Conclave was potentially one of the better films of 2024, became immensely relevant within the earlier months of 2025, and was one of the generally infrequent instances wherein both mainstream audiences viewing films at home via some streaming service and the more dedicated snooty film enthusiasts can both highly admire and feel enraptured by the same film, and for ever so slightly similar reasons. When I look at the Best Picture nominees in the years of the 21st century thus far, I find that I usually do not care for most of the films nominated. I can name the exceptions. I don't dislike Gladiator, it is a fun film for what it is, though Soderbergh's Traffic could be considered a more impressive film and a rather fine work. Altman's Gosford Park is very commendable. I think In the Bedroom is pretty good too, and I really, really love Fellowship of the Ring, I'll very happily state that. And that Two Towers is the only one I really like of the next year's set. Return of the King is accompanied to no free by the very audacious Master and Commander, a very pretty strong film. Sideways is kind of likeable, not a favourite, but pisses on the other nominees for that year. Goodnight and Good Luck and Munich are the better nominees of 05, though the latter makes me sick as of now. Fond of Letters from Iwo and The Departed. No Country was pretty terrific. There Will Be Blood is quite good stuff. Michael Clayton is fairly watchable. Serious Man is superb. I don't think there's anything in 08 that I dig, sadly, very sadly. Not really. Anyway, really dig Inglourious Bastards. District 9 is pretty cool. Avatar is a fairly noble piece of animation, if nothing else. Oh, and 09 is when they started having up to 9 nominees, which I appreciate that more films get noticed, but since most of the films are still dull and or bad, it just ends up annoying me more, really. True Grit is fairly enjoyable Coen fare, really dug Inception. Black Swan isn't bad, though I tend to retch at Aronofsky's work after Pi, anyway. Hugo, Beasts of the Southern Wild, Amour, Life of Pi, Django Unchained, kind of Nebraska. Gravity, I really love Gravity, I do not care what anyone says. Her, 12 Years a Slave, kind of liked Theory of Everything and Imitation Game, really enjoyed Birdman, quite liked Whiplash. Grand Budapest was fun, though I don't like Wes that much. Revenant was super cool, as was Fury Road, of course. Moonlight was very impressive. The Arrival was a spellbinding work. Hell and High Water, Manchester by the Sea, and Hacksaw Ridge, not bad by any means. I adore The Shape of Water. I'm very, very with the mainstream and then some on that. Really dig Phantom Thread. Didn't mind that Darkest Hour picture or Dunkirk either. The Favourite and Roma in 2018, especially the tremendous former. The brilliant piece Parasite. The rather likeable Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and reasonably commendable Marriage Story in 2019, Minari in 2020, Dune Part 1, and maybe Drive My Car in 21. 22 had some pretty interesting stuff with Women Talking, Triangle of Sadness, Tar, Fablemans, Avatar 2, and Banshees of Inisherin. 23 then had Zone of Interest, Anatomy of a Fall, Past Lives, and Poor Things, which leaves us with 24 and only 2 films of interest. This film, and I'd say Dune Part 2 solely. Dig Conclave was very happy I saw it. We need much better Best Picture nominees on the whole. Get it together. You inane Academy, you can make the world a better place, but then I suppose you would have done that by now if you wanted to. Whatever, check out Conclave if you're interested. It's pretty cool, watchable, highly impressively executed stuff. Let me know if you would disagree and have a great day, night, wherever you might be.